Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Employment Policy Committee. I think it's the first one that we've had in this council year. It's good to have them to get to work. So do we have any apologies for absence?
No, we have a full house today.
Okay, that's always good. Item 2, to note council's declarations of interest in matters on the agenda. Okay, that's fine. Item 3, to approve minutes of the previous meeting.
Yes, that was back on the 20th of February.
Agreed. Agreed. Public speaking, have you received any representations from members of the public on any items on the agenda?
No, I haven't.
That's great. Item 5, to receive financial management report on the expenditure for employment matters.
That's just for noting, Chair, and also in case you want to refer to it when we discuss some of the other matters that are on the agenda, but it's pretty much where we'd expect it to be at the 21st of August, which is when that report was printed off.
Item 6 is that all noted? Right. Item 6, to receive a report on transition to new health and safety employment law provider Peninsula, and to note new documentation to be adopted, including model contracts and employee handbooks.
Would you like me to speak to that? Well, I know I apologise for inundating you with documentation, but felt for the sake of transparency, you ought to see the key documents at least. But as you can see from my report, we have been working on the transition from Worknest to Peninsula, and it's been a very useful exercise because it's made us look at quite a number of things that we were sort of used to doing in a particular way differently, and it's brought up new things. All the new policy documents have been, I've spent a lot of time on them. John's been through them as well. And we are now in a position where we're ready to present them to the team, to the staff team. So the advice we've had from Peninsula is that if I take the health and safety first, that's quite straightforward. We've got a new health and safety handbook, and you've got a copy of that in your pack. There's nothing in there that isn't very similar to what we had before. It's all very much the same, and we've been working on our risk assessments and our and making use of the new software that's provided by them for health and safety. I think the transition to the employment law support's been a bit more onerous because we've reviewed every single one of our employment policies. We've also, because there were legislative changes in April of this year, we've needed to update our contracts to bring us in line with current good practice. So we're now in a position where we've got agreed model contracts, and you've got 2 examples of the model contracts in your pack, and we're ready to move all the employees onto the new contracts. There's no contractual changes, it's just that the new contracts are more in line with the way that the statement of what do they call it, Ethan? Statement of main terms is produced.
Statement particulars of particulars of employment.
Yeah, so it's just a sort of it's kind of it's about format really, and the accessibility. The handbook I think is very similar to the old handbook, but it is more detailed, and it is a lot more specific. So for example, if you look at the grievance procedure, the disciplinary and the grievance procedures, they are quite a lot more detailed, and they make much more specific reference to the ACAS codes than our previous handbook did. And I think that will actually be helpful both for councillors and for members of staff. So it's all there and ready to go. The one document that's in the pack that I don't know whether you're interested in making use of is the restrictive covenant document. This was something that was off, Peninsula said, did we want to make use of a restrictive covenant with any specific employees? It's used less, I think, in the public sector than it is in the private sector, where you don't have commercial clients in quite the same way. But the only reason that I included it is because there is such a shortage of good staff in our sector that there's a lot more people taking employees with them when they move. So I just wondered if it was something you wanted to consider.
Chair,
Yes.
it looks like we will have an item later that will require us to go into a confidential session, and I think I would want to have the conversation on restrictive covenants in a confidential session on whether we kind of do it or not, particularly as it might affect the employees, and there are pros and cons which I don't think should be discussed in an open session.
But fine. So yeah, absolutely, we can move that element of the agenda further along.
So shall we come back to item 6?
I think that's what I was going to propose.
And then we'll move on to item 7, and we'll exclude the rest of the public. So item 7 is to review proposed changes to the Town Council performance management system. Clark.
Yeah, so you've seen my report, and for those who were on the committee last year, what happened when we did the performance appraisals last year was that the competency framework, which had some skills listed and that were designated as skill level 1, skill level 2 and skill level 3, that became a bit contentious with employees doing their self-grading, managers doing their self-grade, doing their assessments, and it began to cause tension. And instead of being a positive and experience, people began to feel disappointed. So we did talk about at a previous meeting changing it. I don't want to lose that competency framework because I think it's a really useful document, and it shows what good looks like and it shows what bad looks like. So I'd like to keep that competency framework within the appraisal system, but I think perhaps we need to just take the numbers out of it and make it so that it can't be gamified in the same way. I mean, I think it's really important to remember that the appraisal system is completely separate from any negotiations about pay anyway. So we don't really want to be getting into this kind of, I don't know, I'm thread a minute there. But we don't, we want it to be a positive experience, and if there are issues, we want to be able to address the issues in a constructive way rather than through this negativity that arose from that. I've also spent quite a bit of time thinking about the appraisal system in general, and as you can see from my report, I am suggesting that you consider, rather than annual appraisals, you consider 12 weekly appraisals, performance review meetings. So rather than it being one big thing once a year, it's more about how are you doing your work every quarter. So instead, managers are having one-to-ones with their staff. One of those one-to-ones every quarter will include a review of a more formal documented review of how anyone's getting on with their work, and objectives will be set, management objectives and individual objectives will be set for a 12-week period rather than for a year, because that's it's a less daunting prospect for some staff, and also things change over the course of the year. That's not to say the old system didn't allow you to change things, but I just think by reducing the timescale, there are some benefits which I've enumerated in the report.
Right. I think the floor.
I'm totally in favour of them, particularly the more frequent appraisals. I think it's a very, very good move forward. You're almost becoming not continuous appraisals. I'm not saying that, but at least 4 times a year, I think is a much better way forward. Staff know where they are far quicker, how they're performing, and so do the managers. The managers are required to have a good look at these things as well. So I'm very much in favour of that. I didn't pick up the other issue you raised, the numbers, but take your guidance.
So I was going to say, I think that there is a real move across employment to move to what you've called continuous performance management, and the idea that it's not just a once a year conversation, and that actually people get more frequent feedback about the projects that they are working on, and not finding out as surprise kind of at the end of the year that they are. But I think that in terms of some of the wording here, I think I'd rather use good, better and best than basic.
Yeah.
And although I'm a real fan of alliteration, I have literally, whilst you've been talking, trying to find a B that meets expectations. And I couldn't. or unless we say brief met.
Good, great.
Yeah. It's very difficult, isn't it? Anyone had to use the common value label immediately, and that's what we're trying to get away from. But because I was thinking of sort of sophisticated and more sophisticated, do you know what I mean? But I think even good, better and best is better than 1, 2, 3 somehow.
I think that I do know that kind of perhaps in the some of the children in our locality, basic is one of those new words, and it's kind of basically
What's it mean?
Bottom,
Right. Right.
So oh, haven't you got basic trainers? So we wouldn't want to have the same. I think it's like the connotation with our employees, I think.
Okay. Are there any other comments on policy and put forward?
Just to say, I agree with what's just been said. In my experience, I do have 3 to 4 review in a year. But where I'm struggling is setting of the goals quarterly. I'm just thinking back. So I've got like 5 goals objective to meet. But if we're having to do that every quarterly, would that be, say, 3, 12, 15, 20 goals?
Oh, it would be a smaller number, I think. And I think it will depend on the role of the person that's being that's having the performance review. So if you take, people's job roles are quite different, aren't they? So if you take, for example, one of the landscaping team, their work is they have quite a different routine in the winter than they do in the summer, but during those 2 seasons their work is pretty consistent, so they're not going to have loads of objectives necessarily, because their objectives might be continue to deliver good performance but improve your skills on one piece of equipment, or achieve a training level or something. So there might only be 1 or 2 for them. Then if I was but then if you consider the situation of one of the managers, they're going to have some objectives that will necessarily not be able to be achieved within 12 weeks, which will obviously need to carry forward, and there'll be more. But I just think reviewing them more frequently and adjusting them more frequently is a more productive way of going about it.
Just to add to what you said, as well as Delia, is that yes, you have an objective to be met at the end of the year, but it's the review of it more frequent to make the person be aware of, oh, are you reaching there? Where have you actually attained? How far have you reached? Do you need some help to improve yourself? What do you need to get to go there? So it's that kind of discussion that needs to be done more frequently, so that you could actually achieve the goal at the end. So the objective, yes, it has been set It's a yearly objective, but the review is what really matters, rather than coming at the end of the year and saying, oh yeah, you didn't do too well or whatever. You know, you kind of walk the person through it through the year.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to say, though, where problems exist with it, for example, actually it's no longer able to be achieved or something like that. That is out of the hands of the employee.
Yes.
Maybe it's lots of something else has cropped in and that's become more important.
Correct.
And so the objectives may well need to be adjusted or
Yeah.
different time scales set.
And by doing that more frequently, it feels like an easier process
Yeah.
because you're sort of reviewing it.
And the employee also feels that, yeah, somebody cares about me rather than just giving me an objective and tell me I'll see you at the end of the year. I mean, he says like, okay, walk with me rather than just give me something and then come and ask me at the end of the year, you know, so he feels a little bit cared for as well.
Ethan.
I was going to say, there were some things that I was going to say, but I think other people have covered them, so I won't. Do we need to make clear as competency 8 what grades in our organisation have this competency? Because when you read this, it feels like it's everybody, and clearly, you know, there's going to be roles in our organisation that don't have any responsibility for leadership.
It's on the front page.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I think one of the things we talked about when we reviewed the system after last year's appraisals was, as well as renaming the sort of columns of competencies that we've got in our framework, specifically setting each job description, you know, within each job description, saying which level is considered the minimum, which level of the 3 sort of columns, if you like, 3 levels of skill, which is the minimum. And also, I think saying whether or not or how much of competency 8 is needed for each role. So yeah, I think perhaps what we need to do is assess the individual job descriptions and set those against the skill levels.
Okay. Are we all agreed to accept the proposed changes to the council's performance management system?
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's all agreed. Unanimous. Item 8 is to consider exclusion of the public for the remaining substantive items, and also item 6 now on the agenda, as these are likely to include discussion of personal confidential information or sensitive information.
Agreed.
Are we all agreed to that?
Agreed.
So thank you for everyone who's watched online. We are now going to end the live stream so we can go into this confidential session.